You may have used list comprehensions in Python before, but did you know that Python also has dictionary comprehensions? Find out how to use them and what they're good for on this week's MetPy Monday. Hello, my name's John Lehman and I'm a software engineer at Unidata. On this week's MetPy Monday, I want to show you a cousin to list comprehensions, which are dictionary comprehensions. And this is a feature that I don't think a lot of people know about in the Python programming language. If you don't know what list comprehensions are, before you watch this video, I'd recommend that you go back and take a look at our MetPy Monday on list comprehensions. It will help make this a lot easier to follow. So I'm going to show you a simple example and a more complicated example of using a dictionary comprehension. Granted, these are both a little bit contrived. It's hard to come up with a great example without having to have a lot of supporting code or data. But you could imagine doing these kinds of operations on data frames that you've read in. Maybe you're trying to filter a bunch of data down to some common columns or common indices or do some data processing. And I think you'll be able to see the utility of these. So to get started, I'm going to import NumPy. So I've got it to generate some random data. And I'm going to create some labels for my data. Let's say that it is time, temperature, pressure, and humidity. And then my data, I'm just going to generate a list that has some random data in it. So this will create a length 10 array of random numbers. I'm going to just do that 4 times. So my time, temperature, pressure, and humidity would each, in this construct, be associated with one of those random arrays. Maybe this came in because you used NumPy's load text to read in some data that didn't have any headers, and now you want to stuff that into a dictionary, so you have sort of a named array-like thing. Maybe you're not using pandas for some reason, or maybe you're trying to munge this into a dictionary so that you can easily make it into a pandas data frame. So now that we've got our data there, we can look at it and see, yes, we have 4 length 10 arrays. So if I was going to do this in a loop type setting, I could say something like, my dictionary is an empty dictionary, and then for name and vowels in zip labels data, my dictionary name equals vowels. And if we look at the dictionary, there we go. Well, you see, this took 3 lines of code to do, and we have to process that, okay, I'm creating an empty dictionary, and then there's this tab and a loop. There's a lot easier way to do this, and that is the dictionary comprehension. And that is the dictionary comprehension. So let's try this again with a dictionary comprehension. Just like a list comprehension, we start the dictionary comprehension with the symbol for whatever construct we're going to be making. In a list comprehension, that means that it starts and ends with a square bracket. For a dictionary comprehension, that means it starts and ends with a curly brace. So I've got my curly braces, and I'm going to go ahead and type out the dictionary comprehension, and then we'll talk about the syntax a little bit. So name, colon, val, for name, comma, val in zip, labels, comma, data. All right, so that is the syntax. And you can see it maps directly to our loop above. We're creating the dictionary, so there's our outer curly braces. This for loop came in directly, but then instead of having to indent and have a new line, this is the result that gets shoved in the dictionary. And you see we use key, value for the syntax there. That replaces this line right here. So it's much more concise. This reads much nicer. And as you can see when I run it, it produces the exact same result. So that's a nice way to create dictionaries relatively easily. But now let's do a more complicated example with some conditionals. So I'm going to type out a dictionary that makes some original data that we'll have to work with, and then we'll come back and discuss what we're doing. Let me describe the scenario that I've just created here. I already have a dictionary in this case. The key are these names call1, call2 underscore log, call3, call4 underscore log, call5, and call6. Each of those has a value of a random array. That's fine. That represents our data. The story, the user story that you could think of here, is those columns that end in underscore log are things that we want to display or interpret on a logarithmic basis. So maybe there's something that has to do with like light intensity or radiation or something that we want to display on a log scale generally. So our goal is to go through this dictionary, those keys that have underscore log in their name, we want to take the log base 10 of those values, put that back in the dictionary, and remove the underscore log. So this one gets a little bit tricky. The easiest way when you're starting out writing a dictionary comprehension or a list comprehension that's going to get long is to start with the symbol case and then expand it out. So I'm going to create a processed data dictionary. Remember our dictionary comprehension? We start with our curly braces. And for now, let's make a do-nothing dictionary comprehension, one that just goes through and shoves everything into processed data untouched. Not very useful, not the way that you would copy a dictionary, but let's start there. So key to value for, and this is the way that I like to write these. So for key value in original data dot items. So for every item in original data, we're going to unpack that tuple into key and value, and then we'll assign key value. So let's run that, make sure we have our syntax right. And if we look at processed data, all right, nothing has been touched. So what do we want to do? Here? We want to have a conditional, an if-else. If the key ends with underscore log, take the log 10 of the data and remove underscore log from the name. If it does not end in underscore log, just copy it untouched. You might remember in list comprehensions that if you had an if condition, it went at the end of the list comprehension, which is the same in dictionary comprehensions. And if you had an if-else, it goes at the beginning of the list comprehension, which is also the same in dictionary comprehensions. The difference is we're going to separate the if-else for the key and the value, both sides of that semicolon. And if you just want to have a conditional on one side or the other, you don't need both. But in this case, we need a conditional on both sides since we're going to modify the key and the value. This is also sort of the worst case, so you can see how to do it. So I like to put parentheses around these since I'm going to be putting my conditionals in there. This helps me keep everything straight. So my first thing on the key, I'm going to replace the text underscore log with nothing if the key ends with the text log. If it doesn't, then I'm just going to keep the key. So this reads as if the key ends with log, we're going to replace log with nothing, and that will be the value. Else, don't touch it. Just pass k straight through. On the value side, it's going to be very similar. So I'm going to take log base 10 of the data if the key ends with log, and if it doesn't, else, just keep the data. So remember, everything on the left side of the colon is the key. Everything on the right side of the colon is the value. So I'm going to run that. And if I look at my process data array now, you see that the log went away from the names of column 2 and column 4. And if we compare those data, you see the first value in column 2 now is minus 0.15. Column 2 log is 0.69. So yes, we have taken the log base 10 of only columns 2 and 4, modified their names, and shoved it all into this processed dictionary. This is one pretty long line, I will give you, but it does a lot in a very little bit of typing. Now, just because you can do something that's even more powerful than this doesn't mean you should. You should always think about readability of your code, and this is probably about the most complicated dictionary comprehension that I would put into some production code. But I hope that you found dictionary comprehensions useful and that you can start utilizing them and list comprehensions to make your code shorter and more readable. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you on next week's MetPy Monday.